Was macht Rennsport?
So, not long ago, in the PCA Sim Racing Series 5, last race of that series at Daytona, something fun happened.
As our broadcast of PCA Sim Racing continues, we remind you that tonight's broadcast is brought to you by the racing analytics application, the Z1 Dashboard. The Z1 Dashboard shows you everything you'll need to know about your position on track, your competitors' positions, and where you'll be after pit stops. It can also tell you where your competition is, when you should pit, how much fuel you should take, and what the weather is like. You can assign up to 10 different dashboards to each car and switch between them with a click of a button, so the required information is always at your fingertips. The latest version has just been released that includes even more dashboards and the ability to use your mobile device as a display. To find out more about the Z1 Dashboard, visit them at www.z1dashboard.com. One more free sim racing software package from Z1 Dashboard this series to a PCA Sim Racing ED student each Friday. And tonight, it is the man running in 18th, Chip Witt of the Redwood region in this PCA Sport class presented by Leland West, is the winner of the final Z1 Dashboard Sim Racing software package for Series 5. The PCA Sim Racing EDE program provides coaching from novices turning their first lap of the racetrack to the most seasoned of sim racers. You can sign up for that program at pcasimracing.com/EDE.
Excited to win at anything. Thought I'd take the advantage of having won the Z1 Dashboard raffle and use it to my advantage. Well, actually, your advantage. Share with you some of my thoughts after actually experiencing it, working with it for about a week. Here we go. Okay, we'll start at the beginning. So if you're looking to go to z1dashboard.com, that is the URL that was actually included in the little advertisement there in the video. If we go there, it home runs into z1simwheel.com dashboard pages. So this is kind of good to know, so you just know that is correct. You wind up in the right place when you do Z1 Dashboard, but it's not exactly the same place. It's a redirect. This is done for branding purposes, probably so that they can actually advertise Z1 Dashboard and have that stick in people's mind, and you go here and you find where this actually is. So I got a direct link to download the software, and you can actually do that here by going to the try by section here. And you have to drill down a little bit more here. You have to find Z1 software. Okay, what do we got here? Download demo, and here are the download links. This is my first gripe actually coming here, is that it looks as though there are 3 distinct downloads. They're all the exact same file. If you actually look at the link that actually is showing up there in my browser, it's the exact same file. I didn't realize this. I thought, okay, it's they've gone to the trouble of segmenting the software into a dashboard, server, and analyzer components. Each one is a distinct download. So I download just what I need, install, use it, call it good. It's not the case. It's actually, each link is not unique. It's all the same link. You download it only once, whatever link you choose, and all 3 packages are included in the download. So that's the the first gripe in terms of this. Second gripe is when we actually look to see what we've downloaded, we actually find some interesting stuff here. So let's go ahead and just download one of these packages, and we'll pull it down. We'll actually let it download. It's a 27 meg file. And once it's completed downloading, I can actually show this in my file in the folder where it's actually downloaded to. And here it is as a zip file. If I want to extract that and just do normal thing here, it's going to create a little folder here. We're going to replace. Okay, so here's the folder that actually gets downloaded here. And you can see that we actually have a whole mess here that we have to figure out the important parts from the parts that are just part of the installer needing data to install. So they are all labeled installer, the ones that you actually need to install. So we see here that I actually have multiple installs here, including an update that's kind of confusing things here. But we've got an installer, and we've got an installer for the analyzer, we've got an installer for the dashboard, we've got an installer for the server component, and then a whole bunch of other files. And I get it. I understand why this is probably necessary, and I'm not going to fault them at how they organize their data too much. However, for most users, you download something, you expect it to be pretty intuitive what you need to click on to install the software. And this isn't the clearest I've ever seen in this particular regard. So just be careful. You're looking for the installer file. And what I actually installed and demoed was the dashboard and the Anaylzer. The server component's actually quite interesting. It allows you the ability to run the data collection that Z1 needs and do that on your sim machine, the machine you're playing iRacing or whatever sim you're running on. But then it sends that data, or enables you to send that data to another machine where you're actually running the Z1 Anaylzer or Z1 Dashboard components. And that can be useful for a lot of different reasons. Obviously, if you're really doing high visual, high graphics sims, you may want to turn up the graphics settings really, really high and get the really pretty stuff. That all comes at performance cost. And so any additional piece of software you're running on the machine at the same time can degrade that and can cause stutters and other sorts of performance issues. So minimizing the work that your machine's having to do with the CPU and the GPU to render frames is a good thing. And so if you're really running at the edge, maybe you're running on older equipment, being able to offload the render of the dashboards that Z1 produces can be a good thing from a performance perspective. It isn't always necessary. If you've got beefy enough equipment, you probably don't care, but it's a nice little added feature that makes it a little easier to do that. The other benefit is if you actually have someone on a completely different network and you want to be able to share a dashboard with them remotely. Maybe it's a spotter and you're doing a team event and you're doing something where it's longer and you actually have human spotter. Having access to that dashboard information can be really useful. And remotely connecting to a machine is a challenge. Being able to have a server that's running, that's sending that information can be quite interesting. So I've not explored that very much yet, so I'll admit that out the gate. But it is kind of a cool idea and something worth exploring maybe in a future video. So when you go to install any one of these components, so if we actually said let's install the dashboard because it's here, we click on this and it comes up and gives you a note here, Windows protected your PC. Well, it's not recognizing this is an app. This is another NIT. They've not signed their executables. Okay, in this day and age, I find that to be kind of a shady practice. I think that it's laziness. It's easy enough to get a signing certificate and sign your executables so that Windows recognizes them and you're good to go. Not doing that, it may save a little bit of expense, but it creates a gap for your users. And so I don't like that so much, but you can get around this really easily. You just say more info, trust the application, you say run anyway, and it will go through the installer. Installer's pretty standard. You go through several clicks, you accept the license and select the destination where you're installing, and you're good to go. Same is true also for installing the Anaylzer component. It's the same sort of process. You have to click more info, run anyway, and go through that process. I'm not going to install it because I've already got it installed. Now comes the fun part. So if you've installed Z1 Dashboard, you're going to find it under your start menus. If you scroll all the way down, you'll find it in Z1 Blue Software. I've already installed both the Anaylzer and the dashboard. The dashboard is installed here. Now, one of the things that I find interesting and difficult, and I'll tell you why difficult in just a second, is that the way Z1 Dashboard is configured is you can run a single dashboard that you're actually maybe displaying on a screen, that you're actually having multiple screens, up to 6 total different dashboard informational segments that you can install. And you can also run up to, I think, 6 total instances of the software, so that if you wanted to have different components visible at the same time, maybe on a different screen, or maybe you're doing like what I do with my videos, where I have different components that are showing on the screen at the same time. This is actually kind of cool. The problem with it is that when you're running the multiple versions of the software, you're not getting the ability to name them. So you're having to just sort of remember what you've done with the various dashboards that you've configured. And we'll show you about configuration here in just a second. But here you can see I'm running the dashboards, and in each one I'm getting a named version. I get my 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, if I go into the settings for each one of these, I'll be able to see what the configurations are. So, for instance, if I click on this little wheel icon and open up the screen here, I get this very stuck in the 1990s interface for being a little mean, but at the same time, this isn't incredibly intuitive. It's a lot of data. It's not very well organized, but it's a lot of features in this particular piece of software, so good to know. But we have our general piece here, and this is for just dashboard 1. I can look at display, I can see what stuff is here, track map, get the color defined, and then I can actually define what I'm actually looking at in terms of dashboard. So this is actually all the information that's going to show up on a dash. Here we actually show what the dashes are. So on car 2, we have over here a series of screens that we can define. So we can define screen 1 with any number of multiple types of dashboards. By default, it recognized that I was driving the roof RT12R with the 10,000 RPM limit, which is cool because I get a dashboard that's actually custom tailored for that particular car, and it looks like the car's dash. Someone like myself, where I'm running single screen, which is a lot like a running horse with blinders on. I have extreme tunnel vision on the sides and on the top and bottom, so I don't get the benefit of the really cool graphics in iRacing that show the dashboard, because my field of view set properly, it's focused on the road, and it doesn't give me that ability to see the dashboard. So being able to see that on a secondary screen is kind of cool, because now I actually get that extra level of immersion that makes it a little bit more fun to play iRacing. So I love that dashboard. Now, the other dashboards that you can configure, I think by default, it's got a track map configuration, and there are multiple versions of the track map that you select here based on your needs that have different types of information. So you can select the one that fits your needs best. Then you can also go to screen 3, which is timing and scoring by default. And timing and scoring, there's one timing and scoring dashboard in here, I believe, but it basically gives you all the time deltas and all the information that you expect to find about the person ahead, a person behind, and giving you that information. Dashboard 4, I have configured with tire information and physics information, so it's just a telemetry dash. 5 is adjustments, so showing things like brake bias, traction control, ABS, that sort of stuff. And then dashboard 6, finally, a pit message, basically giving me the information I need for pit strategy. Interesting stuff, and you can actually configure in here a set of buttons to toggle to the next screens and move around the dashboard if there's selectable stuff on the dashboard itself. I found that I have one dash that I look at. It's hard enough to get around the track at high speed with one screen, let alone having 6 at my disposal and scrolling through them. Unless I'm stopped in the pits or spun out side of the road and want to see what's going on around me, I'm not likely to scan through a whole bunch of dashboards. And so that's me, and that's probably a limitation of where I am as a driver. But I don't find that all particularly useful. That being said, it is kind of a nice feature in terms of being able to rotate through dashboards, and tools like SimHub dashboards and other things have similar telemetry collections, which is kind of nice. You can also set all sorts of interesting stuff in here in terms of like your strategy, your pit strategy, how your car actually manages this and notifies you of what's going on. It will actually show on the track map some interesting information about where you're going to come out of the pits, which is really, really cool. You can set up your speech controls. This was actually kind of fun to play with. Some of it got annoying after a while. It uses the Microsoft default sound system so that you get, by default, Microsoft's David.
This is a test.
That is really kind of a pleasant, neutral, almost comical voice synthesized. So I use CrewChief, and I actually prefer the voices that they use in CrewChief. I like Jim, and I like the Clara voice for my spotter, and I've gotten used to that kind of high level of personification in that communication. So the Microsoft voices left it a little bit more feeling like it was a computer talking to me, and for better or worse, I didn't enjoy that as much. The one thing I did actually like is, much like SimHub and the mini-face dashboard, it does have the capability to announce what gear you're in, which sometimes that can be a hard thing to track by feel alone, especially if you try to shift and it doesn't actually shift properly. Hearing what gear you're in is kind of a nice thing. And you can actually do all sorts of interesting stuff in here in terms of turning on a welcome message, getting pit stall countdown, which is kind of nice. CrewChief also does that. Announcing lap deltas, fast lap, your position, laps left of fuel on each lap, which is interesting. It gets a little annoying after a while, but as you get closer to the bottom of the tank, it's nice to know how many laps of fuel you have. Definitely the announcement that you need to pit is a nice thing. What lap number you're on, the number of completed laps, all of that sort of stuff. You can even get sector times announced. All good stuff, all pretty standard stuff, actually, for this type of a tool. You can also, under sound, you can enable or disable sounds with a giant checkbox. You can, as I was mentioning earlier, announce the gear that you're in, which I kind of liked for my own. You can also do an upshift tone if you actually wanted to just hear a beep or it's actually a bell with the Z1 dashboard. You wanted to hear some sort of a shift tone to know when to shift gears at the optimal time. I do that by ear way, and sometimes it's more about where I am on track and what gear I want to be in versus the proper place to upshift or downshift. But that's a good feature as well. If you're driving a car that has DRS, you actually get that notification when DRS is available on track, which is cool. I didn't play around with that, but that's kind of nice. You can look at the offset from the dashboard's rightmost LED, determine when upshift tone will be played. This actually basically allows you to tune the stuff that you've tuned in terms of the car configuration, in terms of your LEDs. Cool. So you can make sure things work. By default, things work pretty well out of the box, which I thought was pretty cool. The last thing that's very, very important, at least it was for me, is I did not want to display the dash on screen as I was racing. I prefer not to have anything in my way as I'm driving. If I do an overlay, I like to be transparent. I don't like to put things on screen if I don't have to, for my experience. Now, when I'm videoing, that's slightly different, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But I do stream to a Samsung tablet. I have an old Samsung tablet that is otherwise unused, so I've turned it into a dashboard. And so with Z1, I was able to turn on web streaming, specify a port number, and set up frames per second, and allow it to set resolution automatically. And now on that tablet, I can go to this web URL, this port number, and actually see my dashboard. So an example of this is here.
That's pretty cool.
So having actually looked at this quite a bit, and I thought it was kind of cool. Okay, well, what about the other dashboards, and what do we have? What would be the use for that? Again, as I mentioned, I do overlays for my videos. So if I wanted to display multiple dashboards in an overlay, this web streaming component makes it available as a browser entry in something like OBS for broadcasting, which is kind of cool. But it means that I can display one dashboard here, right? And then I've got these other instances that I've got running. And here we can actually come in here, and remember I said under car 2, we can see what dashboard we're running. Each one of the instances after the first one only has one screen. So you can add additional screens to it, but by default it's just one screen. So in this case, the first supplemental is the track map. I think the second supplemental is timing and scoring, and the third is, what is it? Telemetry. I think the last one is, forget what the last one is. At any rate, you can set these up, and again, for each one of these, you have to go in, configure network, and here you actually need to make sure that the port number is unique. So here we use 29002, which was the default for the Z1 dashboard. And for each of the subsequent dashboards, I just came in and incremented the port number by 1. You will need to make sure that you're not running other software on your machine that's utilizing those ports. In this range, most people are not going to have conflicting software in that regard. But if you do want to use OBS, you do definitely have to enable web streaming for each one of the components and set a port number. And then you would assign this to the browser configuration in OBS, and you're good to go. What that looks like, in case you're interested, I actually did some experimentation. Here is what it looks like in terms of configuring Z1 as an overlay.
Pit lane speed limit is 35 miles per hour.
2, 3, 2, 3, 4, 5,
Sector 216.547.
4, 5,
Sector 321.141.
2, 3, 4,
Sector 414.984.
3, 2, 3, 4,
Sector 518.141.
Now, if you're familiar with how I've typically done videos, you'll note that I use SDK gaming's overlays, and they're butter. They're really nice in terms of broadcast quality. They're transparent, they're really crisp, they're really clean, they have a really nice look to them. So I wouldn't see Z1 as a replacement for that. But in this particular regard, I'd see this as an engineering feat, or what I like to refer to as a dancing bear. It's not so much that the bear dances well, but the fact that it can dance at all is a pretty amazing feat of engineering, and is a credit to how the software is configured. I would not use it, but it's neat that it's there. So when I started, I actually mentioned that the Z1 Analyzer is a separate component from the Z1 dashboard, and that will be available as a startup icon on your desktop if you so configured it when you installed it, or again under your start menu. If you go all the way down to Blue Software, you'll find Z1 Analyzer right here. So Z1 Analyzer is really kind of cool. It comes up really giving you a nice overlay, as does actually Z1 Dashboard, which I did not show. It gives you some resource hints in terms of how to use the tool, what you can actually use it for, etc. You can dismiss this and close it and make it never come back. Or like I did here, I've actually got it to where it's always here. I have to go through all 7 screens to then close it, because the close isn't available until I've gone through all the screens. Minorly irritating, but it's good suggestions, good hints, links to videos, links to other resources that will help you configure this and make the most use out of it. One of the things that this requires is that you are saving your telemetry files. iRacing has the ability for you to clean that out, especially if you're using other software. Like I use VRS, and the VRS software has a cleanup after itself sort of thing. So after it uploads the IBT files that are the telemetry files for iRacing, it will basically delete them, remove them, so that you save disk space, which is generally a good practice. But if you're using multiple telemetry tools to do your lap analysis, you will want to make sure that those files are in place. So I actually did have to do some tweaking with VRS to keep it from cleaning up after itself. in order to actually test the Z1 Analyzer. So in here, the first thing you're asked is, do you want to scan for laps? And it's going to look in your telemetry folder and find all sorts of good stuff. So the lap scan is finished. Would you like to open a lap right now? And here's where you can actually come in here and see the list of laps. Now, there are a couple of different things here. There's a share laps. If you uncheck this, then you will only see your laps in terms of what you've done on the machine and what exists on the machine. If you click on share laps, you actually get the benefit of seeing laps from other drivers. And it will be, again, on the track that you select here in terms of where you've been. So I did a lot of work in various cars at Laguna Seca recently. And so if I wanted to actually come in here and look at my own times and compare, a fast lap to maybe a subsequently slower lap, then I wanted to figure out what I did wrong or did differently, I can come in here and I can sort by lap time and by car here. And I can say, okay, so my fastest time was 1:22.7. If I want to right click on that and set that as the base lap, then I can come in here and go open a lap, and I can select another lap, maybe this 1229, figure out what I did differently between those two laps, and I can come in here and open that lap. And so now I've got two laps that are loaded in here, and the first thing that actually gives me is a lap overview. And this is actually available under the Analysis tab here if you ever want to get back to it. Under Analysis Lap Overview, we get a nice little look here to see exactly what the difference is between the base lap and the lap that I'm trying to figure out what I did wrong or what I did differently, which is this 12296. And so we get, sector differences. We get which sectors the first lap was faster than the second lap. Interesting things on speed, brake analysis, which is nice. Ride height, so especially with LMP cars, if you are dragging bottom, you are slow. And so making sure that you're understanding where you're dragging and maybe what adjustments you need to make, that's an important thing. Your driving line, it tells you where you missed apexes, and specifically, where you could probably improve. So like here, I was very wide of the apex in turns 7 and 9. I'm not tracking out far enough in turn 5. All really great stuff. It also gives me turn analysis, so turn by turn, gaining the most time in specific turns. 0.2 faster in turn 7, fractionally faster in these. So it gives you really a nice overlay, a narrative, if you will, in terms of how you're performing in your track, and that's pretty cool. I like that type of analysis. I like the narrative because it's not just looking at the data, and so this is very hard to do and do well. And I found that I was actually able to squeeze out a little bit of time just because I better understood the telemetry data that was in front of me. That's really tremendously valuable. You can also do things like speed comparisons, which is really nice. You can see what the differences are between the two laps and your braking, your high speed points, what your exit speeds were. All of this information is really useful in terms of dialing in, because as they say, consistency is what breeds speed. If you're trying to be faster, getting consistent is job one, because if you can turn your fastest lap and be consistent within a couple of tenths every single lap, that becomes something that you can really work on and build on in terms of speed. And this really does help you look at your laps and assess where you're performing, how you're performing, and how you can improve various areas. Now, one of the cool things here is you can actually zoom in on any particular part of the track. It's the wheel, the scroll wheel, or zoom out. You can play the lap. So it actually will show as you kind of go through here what your speeds were relative to one another. So the blue is my fast lap. The red is my lap that I'm trying to improve. And so I can actually see, where is the difference here? And that's quite useful. Other analysis kind of things, breaking points. This actually gives you, as you click, it actually gives you what your braking pressure was. This can be really educational in terms of building up consistency in terms of how you apply the brakes, and not only where you're applying them, but how much pressure. That's something that is very, very difficult with certain types of equipment. So if you have Logitech wheels that don't have load cells or don't have good load cells in them, you may have a more difficult time finding consistency in your braking points. This can actually help you gauge, what you're doing and how you're doing it, and find how to be more consistent. And I'm sure that's true with better gear too. But you get to a certain point with better gear, you get muscle memory buildup that helps you with that as well, because you do have better equipment that's more consistently relaying that information. But here you can, just get that statistic or telemetry information basis for judging how hard you're braking and for how long, and where. And more importantly, what's your entry speed, what's your exit speed, and how do those differ between fast times and slower times? Really, really cool stuff. I found that the braking and the overall entry and exit speed data was really, really, really useful. Other cool stuff, driving line, giving you a sense of where you were in terms of the driving line and where the differences are between fast lap, slow lap, and looking at turn analysis, brake lockups, which I found really cool. I actually didn't have any brake lockups in either one of these laps, so it doesn't show up on this screen, but it will show you where you're tending to get brake lockups. Ride heights, that's pretty, in this particular car, isn't something that's particularly interesting. And understeer, where are you understeering? This can be really, really educational in terms of understanding, where you may need to adjust your entry speeds to better keep the front tires together, or change your braking, change your steering inputs. Obviously, if you're understeering and you're trying to turn the wheel, it's having no effect. And so, unwinding the wheel a little bit actually helps you get grip and turn better. So it's counterintuitive. You think, as you're driving a car, if a car is not turning it more is what you want to do. And that's very seldom the case. You want to unwind the steering just a little bit so those front wheels bite in. And then you have the traction to actually, get a little bit more turn in. And how fast you're going in that turn. You can go slower and unwind your steering just a little bit, and you'll actually find that you can turn a little bit better. So understanding where you're understeering and how badly you're understeering into various corners is quite useful in terms of capturing a few tenths here and there, which is pretty cool. So when we're actually looking at the telemetry itself, this is actually where I felt like we're actually viewing a little bit of a tool that's lost in time a bit. This reminded me very much of instrument screens and applications that I used in the 90s working in the biotech field. Is that it seems almost clunky, and I can't tell if that is intentional, as if it's trying to be a little bit retro, or maybe match other telemetry tools and instrumentation that shops use, or if it is just the way that they designed it. I don't particularly like it as far as a visualization, but this is kind of gives you the overview of your laps in terms of, throttle, brake, steering, your speed, etc. All of the inputs and things that you're interested in. You can do some interesting stuff here in terms of overlay information, which is quite useful. So you can show corner overlays. I was never able to figure out, and I should probably ask this of somebody at some point, what the difference between the red and the blue is. At first I thought maybe it was, is this a distinguishing marker of slow corners versus fast corners, and that's not the case. At least not by virtue of my analysis of Laguna Seca, which is the lap that I actually was looking at here. The other thing, this is actually an idiosyncratic thing, and I'm so glad that I found this, is that this is not the Laguna Seca that I know. Laguna Seca, as I know it, looks like this. But I could very easily rotate the track to an orientation that made sense to me, which I truly did appreciate. But again, back to looking at, so I can see my turns, I can see where my throttle inputs are, my braking inputs, all that are according to turn. I can also show extents. I can show all sorts of interesting information, including all the different traces. I can turn them off, turn them on. I can actually do scatter plots, which is kind of cool. One of the cool things that, just sort of looking at RPM versus speed, across gears and kind of seeing where you are RPM wise and your speed in the various gears that you're driving on track. As a data nerd, this was really cool from a how it affects my driving and improving my driving. I'm not quite sure I've made the connection yet, but it is kind of cool to see scatter plots and things of that nature supported in here. This is very much a technical, it's an engineer's tool. I would actually say it's very engineer friendly. They do have YouTube help, which I have to admit I haven't had time to fully explore. I've looked at one or two videos to kind of get a sense of what's going on. The one thing I did note that I thought was pretty cool is that all of these are time coded. So you're taken to a video at a specific point in time talking at the topic that you're searching for, which is really cool. Meaning that, if he did like an hour-long video talking about something and only like 5 minutes of that is actually covering the topic that's listed here, you're not having to watch the whole video. You get right to the point, get the information you need, and can move on. And that's a nice touch. One last thing I wanted to talk about, I showed this actually briefly, is that when you're actually opening a lap, you actually do have the option of comparing against someone else's lap. So one of the things that I did early on was I looked for somebody in a roof and at Laguna Seca doing the same lap that I was doing to see what somebody faster was doing. And you can right click on a faster lap and set this is your base lap. And then when you come in and do your analysis overlay, you can actually see how he actually did a faster time, and you can compare it to your time. So here, I'm slower by almost a half second. So, where is he faster? How is he faster? So the same thing that you can do in terms of comparing against two of your laps, you can do comparing against someone else's laps. If they're using the software and have set share on and are pushing their laps up to the Z1 server, then you can actually do that and get a nice overlay. It is kind of nice. In order to use anybody else's laps, you have to share your own. So that's the one thing to know. If you're shy, you don't want to share your lap times with perfect strangers. That is a challenge. I am assuming, and I can't say this definitively, but I'm assuming that the broad sharing is a byproduct of the license type that I have, which is a personal license for private home use only, which means that I'm sharing with the wide world out there. If you're buying a more commercial license or a track license that's specific to a team, etc., I have to assume that you can silo your track lap times and telemetry into a box with other people that you trust and share with. But again, I can't definitively say that, and I haven't done the research to be able to say that for certain. But that makes sense. So the last thing that I want to talk about is the licensing model. And, well, it's actually not the last thing, but it's the last thing I'm going to talk about in terms of specifically the software. The license model is interesting here in that they sell the software, and then they also sell an update license. So I mentioned that this is a tool that's a little bit lost in time. There are 3 licensing models, only 2 of which are still really popular in most circles. One is that you buy and license the software, and you get updates for free until the next version of that software comes out. Big major release software comes out, and then you have to buy that whole new package. That paradigm's dying out as well, but it's still one of those that's out there. The second model that's actually more popular now is what's called software as a service, where you buy a software subscription, and it's an annual subscription or a monthly subscription that you pay for. But regardless of what goes on with that product's development, you get free upgrades as part of that package. And that's, nice. And usually the reason why you get those upgrades is in software as a service, where you're logging into a website and playing with the tool. Like VRS is like this to the largest degree, aside from the telemetry collector, which is free. When they make improvements to their software, if you're a current subscriber, you get the benefits of those improvements as they occur. Cool. Okay, that's a good model. What Z1 has done is they've gone with kind of the old paradigm where you buy the software and you can use the software, But if you want to update and keep it updated, you have to buy an update subscription, which they sell a monthly subscription. And I could not find if they have an annual subscription. But this is an important piece here, is that, you know, for the $25 you're buying the software. If we go to standard license, if you buy the software, by default, the checkbox for Z1 software subscription for future updates is set at a $199 per month fee. My problem with this is that I prefer the subscription model personally. Take this number, multiply it by 12, add it to that number, and sell me something for $50 a year, or $60 a year, $80 a year, or whatever it is you're going to set that price point on, and be done with it. This feels like, it feels flexible, but it's not. So all of us that have used iRacing know that iRacing, they do a lot of updates, and oftentimes the updates that they do have performance impact on the tools in the ecosystem that that rely on those telemetry pieces, graphics pieces, you name it. So you know you're going to have a lot of updates that are, you know, products are going to have to change to meet whatever iRacing has updated, changed for performance in the game itself. So doing this to where you have a, you know, a monthly charge for updates on a piece of software that you have purchased seems like you're being nickel and dimed a little bit. And I know it's a perception thing, and it may be my proclivity in terms of how I view licensing, coming out of the software business myself. This just made me feel weird that I didn't have this bundled into the top level price that I was paying for the software. And again, it's a difference in model, and it's a model that has been used before. It's just not as commonplace. I don't see this as often anymore. But it's also too rare that you have a piece of software that almost exclusively runs on the desktop. So I get it, I understand, but I had a problem with this. I would prefer to have an option when you're buying here to turn that into an annual price. I don't like to have things hit me monthly. I prefer to pay all up front for a year and then have an annual recurring charge that I pay for. But that again may just be me. So I guess it really is time for bottom line. Z1 Dashboard, Z1 Anaylzer. Would I have bought it had it not been given to me? I love the dashboard component. And the one thing that I did not say that I probably should have said earlier is that I've been using SimHub and the many-face dashboard for my Samsung Galaxy tablet. As I mentioned earlier, I use a standalone dashboard for the immersion aspect. SimHub's a little sketchy. It crashes, causes problems, doesn't always start up right. Pretty irritating from that perspective, if I'm honest. The Z1 dashboard, in terms of performance in that regard, it did not seem to impact performance. It did not seem to have any problems starting. Once I figured out how to manage the multiple dashboard element, that was pretty straightforward as well. So I automated the start of my #1 dashboard that's got the 6-screen display, and I'm broadcasting that to my Samsung tablet, as I showed earlier. That's pretty cool, and I like that. I would consider that to be a good replacement for what I've been doing with SimHub, and would consider moving forward. Z1 Anaylzer. I loved aspects of it. I think the UI needs a little bit of a user experience kick in the butt. It feels a little bit lost in the 90s, as I've said earlier. But it's got a lot of wallop. It's got a lot of package. I like, again, the narrative aspect of kind of telling you the story of what the data is conveying in terms of your performance opportunities. That's really valuable, really useful, and from the standpoint of learning, is tremendously valuable. VRS is another tool entirely in terms of how they look at the telemetry. I find that actually just in recent laps that I looked at where I had access to one and I still have my VRS subscription, I found I used both tools somewhat differently, but I found value in both of them. So in as much as you can afford to buy 2 tools, I would recommend that. I think that my personal preference still lays in VRS. Mostly because I like their subscription model. I like that it is a software as a service model so that I can pop open my phone or my laptop anywhere I am. Don't have to be tied to my gaming rig where I've installed the core software to take a look at data and do some learning, do some reviewing. So not being tied or tethered to the machine where I've installed the software is quite useful, because software as a service, I can view it anywhere. I've got a web browser. So that's useful. So Z1 does not support that, and that makes it difficult to use flexibly, especially as somebody that works. I travel a lot for work when the world's operating like it normally does. So I'm not always going to have my rig at my disposal to be able to review labs and do analysis, and being able to do that anywhere is quite useful. So VRS is still my chosen analyzer, I think, moving forward. I will continue to use Z1 as opportunity allows, and where I need it to tell me some of the stories that it's able to tell me about my data. So one of the things that is kind of my last comment on Z1 that I think is just sort of interesting to review or look at is that who I do business with, who I buy from, really matters to me. I am a brand enthusiast, and so when I look for tools, I look for tools that are built by enthusiasts, people that are really steeped in what it is that I'm doing. Now, I don't know much about the history of Z1 Dashboard or the creators of it, other than what I could find on their website. So I've not seen a story telling me anything about them other than what I've been able to glean through their website. So the problem with that is, if you look at the top, there is no about on the company. If I scroll down here to the very, very bottom, where a lot of times if you scroll down to the bottom here, you'll actually have information about us, a story about the company, any sort of information. There's no such thing here on this webpage. So that made me scratch my head a little bit, because, I found a lot of, sim racing rigs, dashboards that were created. And yet there's a story. It's like, I was a sim racer for years, and I had an itch that couldn't be scratched by anybody but me. I built this, and I'm now selling it because I've got a passion for the community. That's a great story. Didn't find anything like that here. I went to their Facebook page, and in popping open their Facebook page, I actually, you get in here and it's telling pretty much the same story. You find out that the name of the company that makes it is ZBlue Software, and you get that by virtue of installing the software. That's the folder that the executables are dropped into. But you don't get a lot of sense of who they are, except here, right? Founded in 2003. Let's see more. And I read this, and it says ZBlue Software is a consulting software company based in Stamford, Connecticut. Great. 2003, we work with companies in various markets to rapidly and inexpensively improve their business through the use of strategic software. Our clients range from local businesses to worldwide companies. Their requirements range from informative websites to fully integrated internet, extranet websites, database communications, and systems. Goes on like this, just sort of like diverse personalities with different skill sets, intranet database system, a new concept in database management. What? People who work for ZBlue Software have diverse backgrounds, ranging from computer science degrees, English degrees, la 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 la, and then running their database and business through IDS. I read this and I scratched my head, because it seems like it is almost seems as if it is a private equity firm that owns a bunch of different conglomerations that are doing consultative and specific software design for various industries. So I'm not seeing here, maybe it's sort of like an incubator, a startup incubator, where they basically put a business framework around the work of individual contributors that want to focus on the engineering aspects or the creation aspects of what it is they're doing, and then they bring it to market. But it's not really clear here. So this is where I kind of had the disconnect with Z1, is that when I look for software, I want to know that the improvements that are important to me as a sim racer are going to be reflected in the tool, and that their passions are also my passions, or vice versa. My passions are their passions. And that's important for my buying decision. I don't know that that's true for everybody, but I found that that was a really weird disconnect in terms of looking to see who's making this software. I've seen the personality in the videos, the guy that actually does all the videos, and he seems to be an engineer's engineer, in terms of, you know, how he talks and how he talks about the product, and he's very technical, and that's great. But based on this company profile, I can't tell if they hired an actor to do those videos, or if that's really the guy that's doing all the software and he's leveraging this bigger marketing and business machine to bring his product to market. I think that, me personally, I would like to hear the story of how this software came about, who created it, why they created it, and, you know, what their passion is. It makes for a better story, and it makes me feel better as a consumer buying the product and maybe excusing flaws or things that I see as inconsistencies in the product, and leads to a better relationship from a buyer persona perspective. And again, that may just be me, but that was my last thoughts on this. Overall, I thought Z1 was a great piece of software in terms of what it does, how it does it. There are some rough edges and things that would not be my particular bailiwick, but that can be said for just about any software. Software is hard. Doing it perfect and doing it to everyone's liking is not possible. But it is worth giving it a go and seeing. If you're not using anything like VRS or SDK Gaming or doing other sorts of things that you've already invested time, money, and resources into using, Z1 is a great opportunity to get some really cool dashboards, really well laid out, thought out dashboards to display on another screen, an LCD screen, a tablet, what have you, and get a deeper level of immersion into your gaming. The Anaylzer is a great tool, very technical, a little bit difficult to wrap your head around, but once you do and you get an understanding of how it's trying to convey information to you, it can be quite useful, even though the interface is a little antiquated visually from my perspective. Anyway, I hope this has been helpful. I tried to be balanced in terms of the review. I liked aspects of it, and I disliked others, and I think that comes through in an honest way here. If you have comments, questions, please feel free to let me know. Thank you very much, and have a great day. Bye-bye.